All right, welcome to The Explainer. Today we're going to trace one of the most influential ideas in human history. Really, it's a single promise made thousands of years ago that would go on to shape nations, faiths, and, well, the course of history itself. This is the story of a covenant. So, that brings us to the big question, right? How does a promise to just one family become this massive, world-changing story? We're going to follow the thread of this divine promise as it weaves through generations, through incredible faith, a lot of doubt, and some serious family drama. But to really get why the promise was so important, we first have to see what was broken in the first place. Yeah, so why was a divine promise even necessary? Good question. To get that, we have to rewind all the way back to the beginning. To a world of supposedly perfect harmony, a garden where humanity and its creator literally walked together. And the contrast here is just so stark. The story kicks off with this incredible intimacy. God is described as walking in the garden with people. But then, after one act of disobedience, bam, that harmony is shattered. They're expelled. And that moment of separation, that break, creates the core problem that the rest of the entire narrative is trying to fix. The connection is just gone. And that break, it doesn't just stay in the garden. Oh no, it ripples outward, big time. Suddenly, the first brothers are torn apart by jealousy, and it leads to the first murder. Then, a bit later, you see humanity trying to unite, but it's not in harmony. It's in this kind of arrogant ambition at the Tower of Babel. And what happens? It just leads to more confusion, more scattering. The world is just spiraling out of control into total disconnection. Okay, so the first major attempt at a reset comes in a pretty dramatic fashion, a world-altering flood. And it's right here that we see the very first formal promise, a covenant that's made not just with one family, but with all of creation. So in a world that the text calls corrupt and violent, one guy, Noah, is seen as righteous. He's the one. He gets chosen to build this massive ark and preserve life, becoming the single point of hope for a brand new start. And this is where we need to nail down a super important idea for this whole story, the covenant. Now, this isn't just a casual, I promise. Think of it more like a formal, binding agreement, almost like a treaty that sets up a real relationship. It has clear terms, and it's always marked by some kind of physical sign. And the sign for this first great covenant? The rainbow. It's this universal promise to every living thing that the world will never, ever be wiped out by a flood again. But while this promise is for everyone, the focus of our story is about to get way, way more personal. All right, so the narrative lens now just zooms in, dramatically. We go from all of humanity down to one single, totally unsuspecting man, Abram. And this is where the promise gets super specific, super detailed, and becomes the engine for everything that's about to happen. Really? Think about this for a second. Abram is 75 years old. His wife, Sarai, can't have children. He's settled. And then he gets this call to just leave. Leave his country, his family, his entire world, and go to a place he's never even seen. It's a staggering leap of faith, right from the get-go. And in return for this incredible faith, Abram gets this stunning 3-part promise. First, descendants, as many as the stars in the sky. Second, land, a specific place for them to live. And third, and you really got to catch this part because it's key, a universal blessing. The idea is that through Abram's family, all the families of the earth will eventually be blessed. This is the promise, the one that's going to be tested, passed down for generations to come. So you can probably guess what's coming next, right? A promise of descendants to a 75-year-old guy and his wife who can't conceive? Yeah, that was bound to get tested. This grand, epic covenant immediately slams right into the wall of human reality. And that leads to a whole lot of doubt, drama, and some really profound tests of faith. And this quote, it just captures such a perfectly human moment. When Sarai, her name gets changed to Sarah, by the way, when she overhears the promise that she's going to have a son in her old age, she just laughs. And it's not a happy laugh, it's a laugh of pure disbelief. It really highlights just how completely impossible this whole thing seemed from a human perspective. So instead of bringing instant peace and happiness, the promise actually ignites a ton of conflict inside the family. Sarah, unable to conceive, gives her servant Hagar to Abraham to try and produce an heir. But when Ishmael is born, it just creates this firestorm of jealousy. It fractures the family and brings up the huge central question: okay, so who is the real heir of this divine promise? And then comes the ultimate trial. I mean, just when you think it can't get more intense, after decades of waiting, the promised son, Isaac, is finally born. And then Abraham gets the most gut-wrenching command imaginable. Take that very son, the only heir to the covenant, and offer him up as a sacrifice. It's a command that seems to completely blow up the logic of the promise itself. But at the very last second, an angel stops Abraham's hand. See, the test was never actually about death. It was about trust. It was about whether Abraham would obey God above everything else, even above what seemed like the logical fulfillment of the promise. His willingness to do that solidifies the whole covenant. It's immediately reaffirmed, and now it's stronger than ever before. Okay, so the promise survived its first huge test, but now it has to be passed on to the next generation. And that turns out to be just as tricky, because Isaac's family is defined by this fierce rivalry between his twin sons, a rivalry that started before they were even born. These two brothers could not be more different. You've got Esau, the firstborn. He's this rugged, skillful hunter, a man of the field, and he's his dad's favorite. Then you have Jacob. He's the quiet one, a man dwelling in tents, and he's his mom Rebekah's favorite. This parental favoritism creates this deep crack in the family, and it sets the stage for an absolutely epic deception. And this moment right here is just pure tension. Isaac, he's old now, he's blind, and he wants to give the big patriarchal blessing, the inheritance of the entire covenant, to Esau. But his wife, Rebekah, she cooks up this plan with Jacob, disguising him with animal skin so he feels hairy like his brother. You can just feel the suspense as blind Isaac touches him. He's suspicious, you can hear it in his voice, but in the end, he's fooled by the trick. The deception works. Jacob steals the blessing that was meant for Esau, and when Esau gets back and finds out, man, he discovers the covenant, the land, the power, the birthright. It's been given away, irrevocably. His heartbroken cry is one of the most tragic moments in this whole story. The promise has literally been stolen. So now, Jacob the deceiver is on the run. He's a fugitive. Esau wants to kill him. It really seems like the covenant is now tangled up in all this strife and lies. And yet, it's right here at his absolute lowest point, alone and fleeing for his life, that Jacob has his own direct encounter with God. In a dream of a stairway to heaven, God speaks directly to Jacob. And what does he hear? The exact same three-part promise that was made to his grandfather Abraham: descendants, land, and a blessing for all the families of the earth. So despite all the human messiness, the deception, the betrayal, the covenant endures. It finds its path forward. And that leaves us with this final, really powerful question. How can a divine plan, something so huge and grand in its goal, actually be fulfilled through such imperfect, flawed, and, let's be honest, relatable human hands?